There's no secret who's standing before you, but I'll let you know a little bit more about him. I guess a good place to start is few are more aware of the deep wound democracy suffered 4 years ago this week than U.S. Capitol Police Chief Tom Manger. It's fair to say, more than fair to say, no agency in government was affected more about what happened on that day and in the days and weeks that followed. And it's what brought him to that job, from leading police agencies in the suburbs of DC for a long period of time. The chief will talk about that legacy of January 6th, but he also wants to talk more also about how policing has changed and how our jobs as journalists, what our relationship has been like, and how that relationship has grown over the years, and how we're different, but how we're alike in many, many ways. I'll let the chief talk a little bit about that. Well, he can talk as much as he wants. He's the chief. But I think what I also want to say is that he's standing here at a time when not only we're days after January 6th, but we're also looking at again another inauguration and a peaceful transfer of power that was interrupted 4 years ago. The way that legacy has played out is in the layers of iron barricades that you see around the city, the cordoned off streets. But again, there's more to the legacy than just that. And the chief will talk a little bit about that. His time is valuable, so I hope we take full advantage of the time that he's here. And I will turn it over to the chief, who wants to make some remarks. We'll go for about 30, and then we'll open it up to questions for the final 30. So, Chief, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Kevin. I appreciate it. And Kevin made the mistake of telling me that I am like the last thing for today. So I'm the only person standing between you and going home. And so that makes me feel very nervous, because I felt nervous already. And what's funny is today, just by coincidence, I spoke. This is the third speaking engagement that I've had today, and one was at a training session for new special agents for the Capitol Police. Our special agents investigate threats against Congress. They're the dignitary protection. They do the protection details for congressional leadership. We are the Secret Service for Congress. And then I had an academy graduation, so new recruit graduation that I spoke at as well. So, but there, here you are not police officers. This is, you are journalists, and so I sort of feel a little bit like Taylor Swift's husband on their wedding night. I know what's expected of me. I'm just not sure I can make it interesting. So I'll do my best. I graduated from University of Maryland, and when I began at Maryland, I was majoring in journalism. I was a product of the Watergate, of Watergate. I hung every word that Woodward and Bernstein wrote. Bernstein actually went to my high school. He's about, 10 years older than I am, but he, I hung on every word. Just was fascinated every day about this whole case. And this is before we had a lot of streaming services, and you could binge watch some 8 episodes of something. Well, this was an episode every single day about Watergate, and it was an amazing thing to do. So I wanted to be the next Woodward and Bernstein. I wanted to shine that light on injustice and do good for the world. And so as I continued through school, I started thinking, that I really was focused on people who just struggled with the world, whether it was addiction, mental illness, just poverty, you name it. And I sort of got this idea, well, maybe I want to be a social worker, and sort of help people one person at a time. And then I ended up taking a criminology class, and I thought, wow, this is really cool. And I started thinking about, helping victims of crime, and and again, righting wrongs, finding injustices, and infusing justice. So when I graduated, a couple buddies of mine said, hey, we're going to go down to Ocean City, Maryland. It's a beach town here. And they hire summer cops, just for the summer. And they said, come on, you should go down and do it. So I did. And in those 3 months down in Ocean City, I learned nothing about being a professional police officer. But because they were a bunch of cowboys, and I look back to that and think, oh my God, they gave me a gun and a badge, and oh Lord, and a week's training too. So and I look back on it and think, I'm glad that I knew what I didn't know, and didn't make a fool of myself. But what it did tell me was that was the right profession for me, and so that was a long time ago, and I've spent 46 years as a police officer, and I've watched how policing has evolved over the years. And when I started in the mid 70s, and nobody needs to tell me that their grandparents, were born, after I was, but because I know I'm old. But when I started policing in the mid 70s, community policing was just started. People just started talking about it. Nobody could tell you what community policing meant, but it was supposed to be better, you're going to involve the community in policing decisions, that sort of thing, which actually was a pretty good thing. And I look back at the way that policing has evolved, and I look at things like technology, forensics, DNA. I mean, I remember the first time I got a computer in my police car, how it's like, oh my God, I can just do 10 times the police work, with this technology. DNA, how DNA changed the way that we do investigations. We got, body-worn cameras. When I was police chief in Montgomery County, Maryland, when I was police chief in Fairfax County, Virginia, in 1999 or 2000, I was the one and this was back when the technology we didn't have body-worn cameras, but people were putting dashboard cameras in police cars. And I said, we're going to do that. I want these traffic stops. I want them recorded, and so I did that back around 2000. Then 2015, 2016 in Montgomery County, I put body-worn cameras on all my cops. I didn't wait for there to be some terrible incident where the community was screaming, "You got to put cameras on these cops." I did it before anybody was calling for it, because I thought it was a really good thing to do, and I still think it. In fact, we just did a pilot program. It's a slow process. Just did a pilot program at the Capitol, and we are now going to put body-worn cameras on the Capitol Police. Now, I will tell you that I've been told by Congress that we can only put cameras on officers that are outside. They don't want cameras inside the Capitol. So that's a whole nother, invite me back for that after I leave this job.
Probably be writing about it.
Yeah. So lots of evolution. But the most important evolution that I have seen in policing is that we do a better job today at selecting the right people for this job than we've ever done before. Because I can tell you, when I joined, I go to roll calls, in 1976, 1977, and the things that were said in roll calls, the way people were treated, I look back, I think, are we still okay? I knew that wasn't for me. I was going to be the kind of policeman I wanted to be, but some of the people I worked with were just It was. I at one point I remember asking a guy who had 4 years on the job more than I did. We came out of a call, and I just looked at him. I said, "Why are you a police officer?" I said, "You don't like people. You don't like you complain about everything. Why are you doing this job?" And I will tell you, a few months later, he quit. But he became a school teacher, so I pity the kids that he was teaching. But we do such a better job today at selecting the right people for the job. And how important is that? And it's important for, people that take jobs as journalists. Not just anybody can do it. I mean, yeah, you have to be able to write. You have to, you got to be good at, grammar and all those kinds of things. That's fine. But you want people that have integrity. You want people that have good communication skills. And those two things, the most important qualities for a police officer. Integrity, because if you don't have integrity, you don't belong in the job. And good communication skills, the ability to communicate with anybody on any topic. And I had, there were days when I'm kneeling on the ground talking to, some homeless guy about, I'm trying to get him persuade him to go into, a shelter that we have, and he's telling me why, all the reasons he doesn't want to do it. He's got all his stuff has been stolen every time he goes there, all this stuff. And I have that conversation, and then a couple hours later, I'm knocking on the back door of Ethel Kennedy's house up in McLean, and taking a report about somebody that threw something in their driveway. I mean, you have to have the ability to communicate with anybody effectively, and so we do a much better job at selecting the right people, and I think that that's ultimately going to help and has helped our profession. Some of the people that, you weed out the people that don't have the qualities that you want, and we do again a much better job of doing that. And I watched the pendulum swing back and forth. And by the way, I tell you a very quick story. That when I first year on this job. We had the congressional baseball game, and they had the congressional baseball game at National Stadium, so it's a big deal. And I go there, and my son, who is now at the University of Maryland as well, he played varsity baseball in high school, a big baseball player, and so I asked him. I said, "Hey, son, I'm going to the congressional baseball game. It's at Nat Stadium. You want to go with me?" Yeah, he says, yeah. So anyway, he's hanging out with me, and somebody walked up to they saw us talking, and I introduced my son, and the individual says, "Oh, are you going to follow in your father's footsteps?" And my son says, "No." He says, I don't like the police." And then there's this awkward silence, and he looks at me and says, "Dad, you're okay." But, and then he, and I've just stood there because I know what my son thinks of the police. He has a lot of criticisms about the police, but the one thing that makes me feel better is because he said to me, he says, "Dad," he says, "I know what's in your heart. I know, I've known you my whole life." He says, "I know that you're a good man." He says, "But," he says, "you're in a very flawed profession." So how do you argue with that? It's true. And although I'm not sure there's a lot of professions that don't have any flaws either, but policing certainly has had its share. And I watch, about the way things were in the 70s, the 80s with community policing and things. And then there's events. Rodney King, you had one of the first times that people saw on video the police just brutalizing a man in the street. And the changes that came out of that. And then, then you have things like 9/11. And after 9/11, oh my God, the first responders and the police, they're all heroes. Well, no, we're not. But there were certainly a few on that day. So pendulum sort of swings this way. Then, George Floyd. And, my God, the pendulum swings way back there. And sometimes the police were our own worst enemy. But what the reality is that, that officer who knelt on George Floyd's neck and killed him, what he did tarnished every single person that wears a badge. I mean, we all, got splashed on by that. And there are a lot of people who think, well, that's police. That's what police do. And people have different experiences in life with the police, and they all come to their own conclusions about what the police are. But we're as different as journalists. I mean, to say, oh, all journalists are, and then you fill in the blank, that's no more fair than to say, all police are any one thing. So, but I will tell you that despite what what my son said, that I'm in a flawed profession, I've worked every day to try and make it less flawed. And I've had some successes, but we're not perfect. We still recruit from the human race. So you still got cops that make mistakes and do dumb things. But we have less of the, we're not hiring people that are outwardly racist and homophobic and all these other things. In fact, I look back to the qualifications that you had to have, and the things that would have eliminated you from consideration to be hired back when I was hired back in the 70s. And I mean, they had height requirements. Okay, so what difference does it make if somebody's 5'7" or 5'8", but you had to be a certain height to be a police officer. If you were gay, forget it. They weren't going to hire you. I remember all the questions they were asking me, about my sexual orientation. And I was, at one point, I turned around. I'm on a polygraph. I had to get the thing strapped around me and everything. This guy's asking me these questions, and I turn around and say, "Are you kidding me?" And he says, "Sir," he says, "please don't move. You messed up the results, blah, blah, blah." And I'm thinking, they really worry about, somebody who, not straight getting in through here. And it was all, oh, well, somebody could be blackmailed because of their sexual orientation. Okay, but I will tell you, I work with a lot of gay cops. I have trans cops on my department. Some of the best cops you'd ever want to meet. And it may, but the bottom line is, it makes no difference. It does not matter at all in terms of somebody's ability to be a police officer. Those kinds of things just don't matter. Height, all these other things. So we've eliminated all of those barriers, and we do a better job again at selecting the right people for this job. And I think that ultimately that's what's going to make our profession continue to make our profession better as we try to do that. So I'm going to switch now to Kevin talked a little bit about the job I'm in now. I was very happily retired, by the way, and I just left Montgomery County Police after 42 years of being a police officer, and I was doing some consulting work, working with some other cities, and trying to help improve their police departments, that sort of thing. And when January 6th happened, and I remember on the 6th, 2021. I'm in my office at home, and I'm doing some work, and I hear all this commotion on TV, and I come out and I'm looking, and there's a live shot of the Capitol being attacked. And I was just, for the next 2 hours, I just stood there. I was alternately in tears. I was screaming at the top of my lungs. I was angry. And it was the first time in all the time that I'd been retired that I wished I was not retired. I wish I was back. How could this happen? We have such a great mutual aid relationship in the DC area. Why aren't there 10 other police departments down there helping them? How could this happen? And it happened because the Capitol Police were complacent. They handled big demonstrations all the time, and they just thought, well, let's just be another one. And obviously, it was not. It was something more. And so they got rid of the police chief. They got rid of the sergeant at arms, and everybody had to do anything with security down there, and so. They called me and asked me if I'd be interested in doing this, and ultimately I said yes. And so I've spent the last 3.5 years trying to get us into a position where something like January 6th would never happen again. Now, you talk about sort of as things evolve and how the pendulum swings back and forth. Political violence is and just the vitriol, that people have for people who have opposing views on things. In my view, in my lifetime, it's never been this bad. It is. We have. Last year in 2024, we had over 9,000 threats against members of Congress in that year, and I think that's an all-time high. We had close to that a couple years ago, but you're talking about 10 years ago where we would have maybe 1,000. I think some bad years we had 1,700 or whatever, threats against members of Congress, and here less than 10 years later, we've got 8,000, 9,000, I mean, consistently between 8,000 and 9,000 for the last 3 years that I've been there. And why is that? I mean, we've always had people disagree on things, but today, civility has just sort of gone by the wayside. If you and I disagree on, women's rights, women's right to choose, well, you're the enemy. What you say is wrong. What you say will ruin this country. I mean, this is the big thing. The last election you had, and this isn't just extremists saying it. This is like the people running for office are talking about, if the other side wins, democracy's gone. The person over here says, the other side wins, your country is gone. And neither one of those things is necessarily true. I am, and I could be naive, but I've been around long enough that I do believe that our democracy is strong. It's going to take more than one person to ruin it. I'm not saying it can't be ruined, but I really am confident that no matter which way this election had gone, that we were going to be able to survive whoever was elected. And again, I am someday, when I'm not in this job, I can talk more frankly about my political views, but they really don't matter. I mean, in this job, I've got to protect the Capitol. I've got to protect the members of Congress, and I've got to protect the legislative process. I mean, and which 4 years ago was under attack. And I made sure this, last Monday that that things were going to go smoothly, and they did. And I'm not taking credit for that. There's a lot of things that contributed to that, but I will tell you that there were people that would have liked to disrupt it. There were people who would have liked to change the outcome of what was going to happen on Monday, but we took every precaution. And some people will probably say, "Oh, you overreacted." Well, I will tell you this: I don't know that our country, what damage it would have done to our country had something like January 6th happened again. We had to send in my opinion, we had to send a message last Monday. This will never happen again. And I'm not going to be the police chief in the Capitol 4 years from now, but whoever is, I hope they do the same thing to send the message. This is going to go the way it's supposed to go. Nobody's going to disrupt it. And but political violence isn't new. I mean, I could sort of give you a timeline of shootings that have occurred, before the security was what it is today, where, extremists went in and, shot up the Senate chamber. And, but even more recently, Gabby Gifford being shot, you got, and even more recently, Paul Pelosi being attacked in his home. Jerry Connolly, I don't know if you all know, Jerry Connolly's from Northern Virginia, and Jerry and I have been friends for a long time. But when I was Fairfax chief, he was in the local government, and he and I were friends. And somebody went into his district office in Fairfax City with a baseball bat and beat two of his staff members. I mean, this just happened a couple of years ago. So it just seems like there's more of this, and there's a lot of things that contribute to it. I think social media has been it's a blessing and a curse. And I think that extremists now can, used to be I could stand on a street corner and scream, whatever I wanted to scream. But the only people who heard me were the people that were in earshot. Now you can have somebody just screaming, crazy stuff, and they can have, 100,000 followers in no time. It's a different world that we live in, and I think that's going to be a challenge for you all, as if you care about integrity and care about putting out facts instead of feelings, then I'm telling you, we all got an uphill battle. And so I spent the last 3.5 years. There were I think about 17 or 18 after action reports after January 6th that just outlined all the things that went wrong, and there were well over 100 recommendations, and things we had to do to implement to make sure that we fixed with all the things that were wrong, and every single recommendation we finished and we resolved and we implemented. And it took us a few years to do it, but every single one. But there were big things that needed to be done. And one, because right after the 6th, the people that worked on the Hill, and if you work on the Hill, I mean, you may know this, the folks that work on Capitol Hill lost, I think, or certainly their sense of safety was really damaged. I mean, when they went to work, they didn't feel like, oh, I can just focus on my job. They really were scared. They didn't know, could this happen again? How safe am I here in my office? But I will tell you that the cops there, the Capitol Police, lost confidence in the department because the department let them down. I mean, there were intelligence failures, there were equipment failures. They didn't have enough people. They didn't have a good plan. They didn't have the training that they need. All of these things contributed to this happening. And so as I'm doing all these other things, I'm really trying to restore the cops' confidence in the department, and I'm trying to restore the sense of safety to the people who work on Capitol Hill. And I'm not saying it's perfect and that every single person, feels great again, but I will tell you that we've made huge progress in both of those areas. And it hasn't been cheap. People talk about the increase in the Capitol Police budget. It's been substantial, but I can justify every single line of that budget by pointing to the workload and how that's increased. When we go from 2,000 threats against members of Congress in 2016 or whatever it was to 9,000 just 5-6 years later, am I supposed to investigate all those threats against Congress with the same amount, with four special agents? Can't do it. So we got 30 in there now that are investigating, and we have nationwide responsibility for these. If somebody's, and the way this has changed is that it's not just keeping them safe on Capitol Hill. That's actually the easiest part. When they're on Capitol Hill, I can keep them safe pretty easily. It's when they go home, if they have a residence here in DC. It's when they go home to their home state, home districts. It's when they're traveling. My God, they go to the airport. The people harass harass them to death. I could give you example after example of members of Congress. There's a senator who I've spoken on the phone with at least 3 times over the past couple of weeks, because what is happening to her is just nonstop, and and I don't know how a person lives their life when you're being threatened, harassed, stalked, people damaging your home, threatening your children, all these things. How can you concentrate on anything when these kinds of threats go on? In the month of November, this past November, we had over 50 members of Congress who were swatted, and you all know what swatting is. I mean, and so, I got swatted too. So and it's and what's funny is I'm so used to, death threats and things like that, and but I have a daughter who's a junior, Division I athlete. Did I mention that too? No, she is though. But she was home for she's home for Thanksgiving and from school, and she this really shook her up, and it broke my heart. I mean, I kept telling her, I said, sweetheart, this is nothing. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. And but whoever did it knew my address and all those other things, and so it can be disconcerting. And while I'm used to it, a lot of people aren't, and it just and especially if the harassment just goes on and on and on and on. So as time went on, we were focused on the election, we're focused on the electoral count, we're focused on the inauguration. So we've gone through the first two, and they've been peaceful. Now, there's folks that would say, oh yeah, well it's because the election went this way, and we were prepared for whichever way that election was going to go. And I didn't know what to expect this past January 6th. Got more information when the election results came in. I had a little more information. But I couldn't sit here and say, oh, well, okay, it's going to be fine because, it went this way or that way. We had to be prepared for anything, and we were, and we are. I can tell you, the inauguration, we've got, there are going to be hundreds of thousands of people in D.C. for the inauguration. A lot of them because they want to attend the inauguration. A lot of them because they want to protest the inauguration. And so we're going to be prepared for that. I mean, hundreds of thousands of people. And I'm getting to the close to be finished here. So
Remember, you're in between beers. So.
Yeah, I know. That's why when I say, any questions,
kidding.
there'll be
I'm
no
just
questions. I know that. I know that can. But I just want to finish with the pardon issue. The first pardon ever issued by George Washington in 1795. I think it was somebody who had like a liquor violation or something. I can't swear to that. But every president since then has used that pardon, authority that they have, and it's pretty much unchecked. I mean, that's the way the founding fathers put it. Made it that presidents can pardon just about anybody for just about anything. I think treason is eliminated, is accepted, but anyway, as a cop, I can tell you the first time that, and I can't remember if it was Jimmy Carter, God rest his soul, a good man, or if it was Bill Clinton. I can't remember who it was, but I remember as a cop, somebody was talking about pardoning a guy who had killed a police officer. And of course, in the press is like, okay, well, what if they killed a journalist? And you all might care a little bit more than if it was just, and maybe you wouldn't, but I thought, well, wait a minute, this guy killed a cop, and thinking about, pardoning him and everything. I paid attention, and I've paid attention to who gets pardoned and why they did. It's just, I just have. So now I'm impacted by, we've got the president-elect who is talking about pardoning, all the people that were arrested on January 6th, many of whom assaulted cops. And all right, this is not about the president-elect. It's not about January 6th. It's about anybody who kills, hurts, injures, assaults a police officer and not being held accountable. And I'll tell you why. And this applies to journalists too. Journalists, police officers, we are expected to occasionally put ourselves in harm's way to do our job. We have to take risks sometimes to do our job. So how does the community, how does society, how does the government, how does the public, what deference do they give us? Because we have, we're expected to do this, especially if you're expected to do, maybe it's a really difficult story that you're doing, and you may have to, again, put yourself at risk a little bit. Maybe you get assigned over to the Middle East, to cover the the war. Maybe you get there's any number of assignments you could get that puts you in a dangerous situation. So you could say, nope, not doing that. Or you could say, that needs to be done. I'm going to do it. But people should pay some respect to the fact that you willingly take this risk. And they should show some grace, and I believe me, I wish I was more articulate about this, because when you ask police officers to do what you ask them to do every day, and then you depending on how you feel politically about, and I'll give you a great example. We had there was a protest, a pro-Palestinian protest at the Capitol, and it got heated. It got to a point where one of my police officers was assaulted, and we made an arrest right there at the time, and afterward we had people saying, shouldn't have arrested, because they felt like that this protester was so right and so passionate about what they were fighting for, that they should never be arrested. Well, okay, I get that. I get the passion. I feel passionate about a lot of things too. But there's a line you cross. If somebody doesn't like the way you're reporting and goes up and punches you right in the nose, okay, that crosses a line. They can disagree and hate you and not like what you do, but they cannot punch you in the nose. And so it's almost like, well, if I agree with the person who was arrested, and I think that they were fighting for what was right, well, yeah, they should be pardoned. If I don't agree with them, it's like, I'm all for women's right to choose. So when these pro-lifers, when they get locked up, good, lock them up. Okay, so pardon one, but don't pardon the other. Depending on the way you feel, you can't do that. You cannot politicize this. And so this is what bothers me. It's not about the president-elect. It's not about January 6th. It's about politicizing when a police officer does their job. And look, when I talked about this before, I said, look, I get that sometimes cops don't get it right. I get that sometimes cops make mistakes. But the vast majority of the time, we're doing our job, we're doing it lawfully, and we're doing it properly. But people sometimes love it, what we're doing. Sometimes they don't like it because they're for the other guy. We just can't do that. When you cross a line, you've got to be able to feel like people got your back. Whether you're a journalist and you take the risk, or whether you're a cop and you make a lawful arrest, and all of a sudden it's politicized because this person, their father is some influential, he's a governor, so, and trust me, I've seen so many of these things. Look, what President Biden did, he pardoned his son. I don't know about you, I'll speak for myself. If I was a president and my son was in trouble, I'd have a very difficult time not just signing that and say, get him out of trouble. I love my son that much. I love my children that much. And so it'd be very difficult. And is it ethical? Is it the right thing? All this, it's my son, okay? I'm just telling you. So you get, depending on whose family it is, depending on how you feel about something politically, all of a sudden that, allows people to go unaccountable and what they've done wrong is just, vanishes because they were friends with the right person. They were fighting for the, something that the guy who's hard in power agrees with. It's just aggravating, and I don't think it's right. So I'll stop there. I don't know how compelling that was, but I'll stop there.
A good place to stop and open to questions. I'll just jump out of the box on the pardon issue, and I think you were asked this on the Hill recently, but if that does play out the way folks expect, what kind of damage will that do to the morale and the agency that you've now worked years to restore?
Look, I can speak I won't speak as a chief, because as a chief, the last thing you should ever ask a chief about is like, how's morale? Okay, morale's in the eye of the beholder. Some people love coming to work every day. Some people hate coming to work every day. And some days it's like, today I like it, tomorrow I won't. But what I want, as I said before, what I want to do is restore the confidence, of the officers in the department. That's the best I could do in terms of impacting morale. But what your question, I can tell you that I can make a really educated, probably pretty accurate guess that half of my cops voted, for Trump, and half of them voted for Harris, because we're a good sort of microcosm of the rest of the public, and so I don't. It's hard to know what people will feel, but I'll tell you what I feel. I'd feel like this is not right. And I feel terrible for the victims of these crimes. And the same way, take away January 6th. When you have somebody whose parents are killed by somebody and they get pardoned after, they've spent 50 years in jail, we're going to pardon them, whatever. Well, if that was my parents who got killed, I'm telling you, I'm not going to be happy about it. And so I think there'd be a lot of officers that are very unhappy about it. What I've heard, from a number of people is that, if the people that actually just walked through the Capitol and were charged with trespassing and, didn't really destroy property, they didn't, commit any violence, who cares if they're pardoned? But you all saw the video. I mean, I got cops that were just stomped, were beaten with, hockey sticks. And I mean, it was just brutal. They were brutalized. And so I'm and I could name you a bunch of other cases that didn't happen on January 6th, that if these people were pardoned because of the cause that they were representing, I'd be very unhappy about it.
Go back and then around.
Okay, it's on. Hey, Grant Traub with the Detroit News. So if the legislative process in Congress were to become under attack physically again, and I'll try to minimize how politically I phrase this question, but by another branch of government, how would the Capitol Police respond going forward?
Well, our job is to protect the legislative process. So we would physically try and prevent anybody from interfering with the work that Congress does. But, half the time Congress is doing, there's a lot of things that we can't interfere with, even though we think it's a little chaotic. But a physical attack on the Capitol would be repelled by the Capitol Police. Absolutely. We do everything in our power to make sure that Congress could do their job.
Hey, Chief. Thank you for doing this. My name is Michael. I'm with CNN. You talked a little bit at the beginning about how you got into this profession for all the right reasons. You wanted to get into social work. I think it's very commendable, but I'm also skeptical of the idea that there are a ton of people who want to become cops for the bad reasons. So at some point in the process, there has to be either a corrosion of your sort of ethical standards or a corrosion of your morality. I'm curious, what are some of the biggest predictive characteristics or qualities that you're looking for in recruits that they might not be outwardly showing that you think could be a sign that you might have trouble on your hands?
So there's a great thing I learned from the police in Scotland that while they're still applicants, you put about 8 or 10 applicants in a round table, and you just say, talk about immigration. And just throw a topic out there, and they start talking about it. And then you get the one guy says, I think all those foreigners ought to be thrown back to the country they came from. We ought to throw them all out of the country. You get somebody else who says they're all criminals and this and that. And then you get somebody else that says, these people are just here in the country and they're trying to make a better lives for themselves, and so you start to hear about somebody who perhaps has and you watch for people who display bullying behavior. You watch for people that display racially insensitive behavior or ethnically insensitive behavior. You look for people that actually, try and bring people to a consensus, and all these kinds of things. That you can, people start like trying to sort of help, get things resolved better. People, peacemakers, and you can discern a lot about people's personality and their ability to deal effectively with other people who might not disagree or might not agree with. But you can also identify the people that I'm not sure that person's going to be, because I think where we've spent a lot of time trying to weed out the people that have these qualities, that they are closet racists. Look, we all go through the training, to identify our biases, that maybe unconscious biases and that sort of thing. That's all really good stuff, and I think it provides good value. But there's a lot of people that are consciously biased, and if you can identify them, you eliminate them. So there's the testing that we do, the psychological testing, all that kind of stuff. But the biggest thing to help us now is everybody leaves a social media footprint. And you go back and you can see what somebody's put out on social media for the last 4 or 5 years, and boy, you identify a lot of people that say, we don't need that person, and so it's just easier today, and we've put things in place to make better selections of people, to try and keep the wrong people out of this. Because I will tell you, back, I worked with officers when I first came on. I worked with officers that were hired in the '60s, and I mean, they were throw around the N word, just like it was nothing. And I'm thinking, I wasn't, I wasn't naive, but I'm thinking, you shouldn't be doing that. And they would, and the things they'd laugh about and make fun of and all that sort of thing. We're a lot. We really have evolved a lot more. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's what I'm saying.
Over here, Lily.
Hey, my name's Lindley Sanders. I'm with the AP. You had mentioned that the threats have increased against members of Congress from, I think you said, around 2,000 to maybe 9,000, roughly estimating. Over
the span of like 8 years or so.
Okay, over the span of 8 years or so. And somewhat assuming here that might not decrease or stay plateaued with the next administration. So I'm curious, how do you prepare your team for that kind of influx? And then how do you prepare members of Congress for what they might be facing when they come into this role?
So that's a great question, because we, with just recently, over the past few months, we did a lot of orientation for new members of Congress. And there were over 100 from between the House and the Senate, over 100 new members of Congress. And we talk about how you can minimize threats by staying off social media, what not to put on social media. It's great to put out your schedule, so your constituents know where you are, what you're doing. But sometimes that ends up being a liability, because they say, oh, look, she's going to travel from here to here, so she'll be at the airport, So we advise them to be a little less open about where they are and what they're doing, and then we also have created dozens and maybe now hundreds of memorandum of agreements with state and local police, so that when a member of Congress says, "Hey, I'm going to do a town hall meeting in Omaha," we can call the Omaha police and say, "Look, Congressman so-and-so is going to do a town hall meeting. It's of this date, this time. Here's the location. Can you all have a couple officers, just stand in the back of the room to make sure everything is peaceful?" And here's the key: Congress has given us funding to reimburse Omaha for those kinds of requests. So, because a lot of times you get departments say, look, we just don't have the people, we're so busy, we don't have enough people to do this. But when you say, look, you can hire somebody on overtime, you can hire somebody who wants to make a little bit of money on their day off, all of a sudden they can help us out. So putting those kinds of things into place have helped us keep them safe, places. And then we just have to make sure that that we're keeping up with our caseload. And that's, and of course it's easy for me to say, well, I need more people, and well, it's going to be more money. And people get tired of that after a while. But if I can show you that, look, this is how many threats we had, this is how many cases we worked, and here's how many investigators I have, do the math. I can't, one special agent cannot handle 500 cases. So, we need more. So I'm pleading that case, with the appropriators. But in this meantime, we're trying to advise members of Congress how they might be able to sort of minimize the kinds of threats that they're getting.
Hi, Skylar Woodhouse with Bloomberg News. I was just wondering, for law enforcement officials, yourself and your position with the results of the election, was there, maybe a sigh of relief that Trump won, assuming, what happened in 2020 and January 6th, that because he won, there most likely wouldn't be another January 6th versus if Harris had won, and what that could have looked like?
I really didn't do a sigh of relief because no matter how it turned out, there's the same pressure to make sure that everything goes okay. Everything went okay on the 6th. Now, I will tell you that, whenever we have, isn't it something, and you all are so young, but for most of my life, when the election results came out, you had the person that won say, hey, I won, and the person that lost said, congratulations to the person that won, and then life went on. And now, just that doesn't happen, or it doesn't happen as much. So I was, but a sigh of relief, no. And I will tell you, because the inauguration is going to, like as I said before, it's going to be hundreds of thousands of people there, and not all of them are there to celebrate the inauguration. Most of them are, but not all of them.
Stephanie Wyatt, also Bloomberg News. The question I have is, obviously in this last year, there was a lot of concerns of political violence on the campaign trail, and the topic of recruitment that you had mentioned also applied for U.S. Secret Service. And I'm just curious, when it comes to law enforcement at large, how is everyone handling this, perhaps this, decrease in interest of joining the police force? Yeah,
that's been a real problem. And who was it? I forget who said this, but the answer to all your questions is money. And we've in the Capitol Police, we've raised the starting salary significantly. So the day that you step out of the police academy, you haven't even started your first day at work, you're making $85,000 a year, which is pretty good. And so and departments are coming up with retention bonuses. Hiring bonuses, all that sort of thing. We had, for the last few years, we added, you could apply for some funding or money to pay off student loans. So, all those things were attractive to new applicants coming in. But the other thing is, and I'm just going to give a plug for Capitol Police, the culture of the Capitol Police is it's by far and away, this is my third police department, far and away the best culture that I've ever been a part of. The cops there, look, they're not crime fighters. We do have crimes, and we do, have difficult days, but they don't have this us versus them mentality with the public. And a lot of other police departments do, and I rarely get complaints about, the cop was rude to me or whatever. That was a daily thing in my other jobs. But this over here, at the Capitol, that my cops treat everybody like they're important, and it's a great culture. And you can be a federal law enforcement officer and not be transferred all over the country, like with the FBI and Secret Service and DEA and all the other ones. So the worst I can do is take you from the Senate division to the library division. So you're across campus. But so there's a lot of things that are appealing to people, and so we have not had any problem recruiting. But you notice that the Secret Service, they have these huge hiring bonuses now, and so, and a lot of other, my old department, Montgomery County, Maryland, doing a huge hiring bonus. my philosophy was to go with the retention bonus, keep the people you have, versus because the new people, you're hoping that this turns out to be a good employee. People that I got that are taking the retention bonus, I know they're good employees, so that I'd rather keep them than. But it's all a strategy to keep people.
Hi, I'm Haley Bullis with the Washington Examiner. Thank you for taking the time to talk with us today.
Sure.
I just wanted to circle back with you about the potential January 6 hold-ins. And I was just curious if you've had any conversations with lawmakers or even the president-elect's team about, your thoughts on those or how those could potentially affect morale.
I decided to do an interview with the Washington Post about it, and it came out a few days ago. And I've gotten some reaction from it. I tried to keep it very nonpartisan because I have to. I never mentioned the president-elect's name, and because it was bigger than just that. And so, but I will tell you that I've been encouraged by the fact that people on both sides of the aisle have said, yeah, I don't think that people that assault police officers ought to be pardoned. So that's encouraging to me. But not everybody says that, by the way.
Hi, Katie Stanton from Tax Notes. I'll start off just by saying thank you. As a Capitol Hill reporter, you also keep us safe all the time too, and I really appreciate being able to feel safe coming to the Capitol every day. My question, you were talking about protecting the legislative process. There's obviously aspects of the legislative process that affect the Capitol Police. You talked about the budget. The other thing I think of, you mentioned that there are, trans folks on your force, and there's been legislation in the House that restricts them, for example, from using the bathroom in the Capitol. So, with keeping in mind the intent to be apolitical and focus on protecting that process, how do you juggle that with how that process can also, directly affect the Capitol Police and how you all function?
That's a great question, and just that specific issue is, we had a group that came in to the Capitol and intentionally used. They weren't necessarily trans, but they intentionally used the other gender's bathroom just to protest and demonstrate. And again, if you think that's a brave thing to do and everything, you probably didn't like the fact that we, ended up having to arrest a couple of them because they wouldn't leave. So, my officers and I have a lot of officers that are gay. I have a lot. I don't have a lot of trans. I have a handful, and doesn't seem to be a problem with my department. Nobody's complaining about the locker room situation or complaining about the bathroom situation. So, and we have our own sort of bathroom. Now, I use restrooms all over the Capitol, when I'm out there. But if I didn't want to start a problem or whatever, I know I got one I can use, and that's that. So I'm happy about the fact and thankful that one of the big things that we've done in terms of equity and inclusion is to make sure everybody feels like they belong to that department. And everybody, and that's my goal, is that everybody feels like they belong. When they go to work, they feel like they belong. And so I've not heard one peep about any of the issues within the police department. So what goes on, I have a job to do, and it's not enforcing rules. Other people enforce rules, and that's a rule about the bathrooms. And so the sergeant at arms and other people can enforce that rule. But once somebody trespasses in there, then it becomes a law enforcement thing. But so let's not poke that sleeping bear, because it's sleeping, and I'm just fine with that.
For maybe one more, but I'll ask one.
Make it good if this is the last one.
Well, I'll reserve the right for anybody to interrupt. But there's when you were mentioning the threat volume and how you're responding to it, I think one of the things that the Pelosi attack sort of highlighted was the need for protection for some members when they're back in their districts. And at that time, and pre-January 6th, the capacity for the Capitol Police to do that kind of work was not up to, I guess, the demand. Can you talk a little bit about where you are on that and how, the threat environment has changed what you do?
So back when this occurred, Ms. Pelosi was the Speaker of the House. That is second in line to the presidency. The Vice President's first in line. Speaker of the House is second in line. The Vice President has, I think, I'm sure Secret Service wouldn't want me to give numbers, but there's at least 200 or more Secret Service agents protect the Vice President. And it might sound like a lot because, oh my gosh, well, I'm protecting you. How many people do you need? Well, it's not just around you where you are. And certainly for someone in the line of succession to the presidency, and by the way, the next person after the Speaker is the President Pro Tem of the Senate. So I've got those two. Anybody know who's next? Exactly. Okay, she gets an A today. So Secretary of State is next. So the Secretary of State has over 100 agents protecting them. We had a fraction of that protecting the Speaker or the President Pro Tem. And this is about the legislative branch of government saying, oh, we can do it smaller, cheaper, we can do it, But then what we found out was that it wasn't effective. And so you can't, and so now we do have people in the line of succession. We do have someone protecting their home, whether they are there or not. We've got folks that travel with them constantly. We've got folks that do, if they say, well, I'm going to fly to New York and I'm doing a fundraiser, blah, blah, blah. Well, 5 agents go off to New York, a few days ahead of time to do, the advance work. And so the numbers of people that it takes to do, and then the other thing is it's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. God bless my special agents. They, some of them over the Christmas holiday didn't see their families for 2 weeks, because they were out, on a protection detail. And so you can't just make the same people, never have a day. People have to have days off. You can't work 24 hours a day. So just to have 3 shifts, have the advanced people, have the people, in other locations where the protectee is going to go, has been, is expected to go back to, all those kinds of things. So yeah, we've increased those numbers, but they got to continue because we typically had 10 protectees. It was just the leadership that had protection details. We now have 14.
14.
But did they increase the numbers for us for that? I mean, we're robbing Peter to pay Paul. And
10 to 14 increased over what period of time?
It goes up and down because some of these are threat-based details, and where you have a threat that's, I can't tell this story. But
Go
you
ahead.
have people. No, you have people that get, they have threats against them. They're real threats, and we have to put a detail on them. And it was one congressperson that we put a detail on for. We had a detail on them for a week, and then we locked up the person that made the threat. So that person was incarcerated. The threat was no longer present. So when I said, okay, well, we'll drop that detail, and that member came and said, well, I have other threats against me. I'm telling you, if you ever have a protection detail, you will love it, and you will not want to give it up. It's pretty nice not ever having to think about anything. Every door's open for you. You know that you're going this way. All you got to do is sit in the car. It's pretty nice having a protection detail. I've never had one, but I will tell you that there was a time when I had to have a driver, and I don't even like to have a driver because I'm a very bad passenger. So it was, while it was nice getting driven around, I couldn't relax. I felt like I felt obligated to talk to the guy the whole time, it wasn't getting any work done or anything. So it doesn't work for me. So I am my own security detail.
Well, if that ends it, I hate to close it down, but I wanted to thank you so much, not only for the time, but the timing of this visit, given all that's happening in D.C. So join me in thanking Chief Manger.
Thank you.